Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to CarMiZa. This is going to be Trunk Details Part 30. The build continues. If you're not familiar with this car, this is an old school car audio system that was built originally back in the 90s. I am restoring the car back to its original kind of a setup and luster, if you will. The car features, here's the actual car, 13-inch woofers in the kick panels, which are infinite baffle. I am redoing, you see all the Dynamat work in the interior, and redoing the trunk as well, which features gold-plated Milbert amplifiers, some old Sony XES equipment, and then a couple of Zapco amplifiers up there as well. In the last video, we started working on the trunk lid cover, which is going to feature an iPad, a 13-inch iPad, and a couple of little display panels. So we built this wood piece in the last video. In this video, we're going to continue the work in the integration into the actual trunk lid. And you can see here, I've got the correct size hardware now in there. So these are going to be the display panels. And I also took a piece of carpet, and this is going to be a similar type of carpet that I'll use. It'll be tan. And I just cut this just to get an idea of the curve, but you can see again, that's the way that's going to look. So nice clean edge there up against the iPad. So, all right, let's go ahead and get started and we'll continue the build. All right, the next thing I'm doing is kind of getting an idea as to what the angle is going to be on this panel when it goes into the car. There's pretty much one place that naturally kind of fits in, which again is why I put the 45 on this top. One concern I have is that the trunk lid is not perfectly vertical, and therefore the iPad is not going to be perfectly vertical. I just spent a little bit of time playing around with it, and I don't think that's the end of the world. I could kick the bottom of this out, but in doing so, I'd have to pull it out like 2 or 3 inches to get the iPad vertical, at which point I end up with huge hills over here, which is going to make it really difficult to carpet. So this will give you an idea of kind of what the panel will look like in place. I'll probably kick the bottom out maybe an inch or so like that. And then let me show you, I'm gonna grab the iPad. And if I have it up, give you an idea, even just playing a video here. So again, instead of it being perfectly vertical, it's gonna be kicked at a slight angle. Also, the car is on rollers right now, so it's naturally a little bit higher than it would be, but I think it's going to be totally fine. I'll come up with a good compromise between the angle and the difficulty of carpet. All right, with the lid off the car, I'm going to work on trying to get this thing to position just a touch better. So I'm going to try to drop the top into the trunk lid a little bit, and then I'm going to kick out the bottom again just to give me a more favorable angle. With it in place, just sitting in here, it centers up very nicely because the lid is symmetrical and the piece kind of self-centers. What I'm doing here is I marked a straight edge here and here, line that up, put just a straight edge here, grab my ruler, thanks again buddy, you know who you are, and measure it here to make sure I've got the same kind of a beginning reference distance. Now when I whittle away at the bottom of this, I can make sure that it maintains that same gap. I'll use just a DA sander here with a 40 grit and kind of carefully chew away at the back where it is hitting. It is not hitting very much, but you can see where it is hitting. And again, this kind of a reference measurement is going to allow me to make sure it drops in proportionally. So, all right, go ahead and get that done. All right, I started cutting away, as you can see here, just sanding it away, and I need to do a little bit more over here. One nice thing about Arizona, it's the end of December, and it's supposed to be, I think, 80 degrees today, so t-shirt, shorts. You might hear me complaining in the summer, but it's not so bad now. So here we go. Nothing, you know, super critical about this. That's kind of the name of the game. All right, as needed, the bottom area is kind of, as my father would say, hogged away. Again, notice this is not a perfectly straight cut and all of that. In my opinion, there's a time and a place to be precision. This is just to get the meat out of the way so that this thing can lay a little bit flatter. When I'm doing things like these inlays and this, where I've got a critical edge that I'm going to use to cut my carpet, that's got to be perfect. So, all right, let's take a look and see how it fits in the trunk lid. Okay, I measured it. I'm about just over a quarter, maybe 5/16 lower this way, which is what my objective was with hogging it out. And I've also played around with, I'm going to build up, as I said, the bottom of this to kick it out. So you can see the angle now. It is going to be more of an angle this way than the trunk lid itself, therefore getting the viewer kind of more on access to the iPad. These are the spacers I'm kind of playing around with. I've got various different thicknesses here. I'm going to kind of make a final decision here, and then I'll probably just attach a couple of cleats like this just to be able to build this up and hold it in place. All right, I ended up at a piece of 3/4 and a piece of 1/2 inch. That's kind of my compromise, and I think this is going to transition well here. It's not too high, and if you see, the plate is definitely at more of an angle than the trunk lid itself. These are just brad nailed in place, so we're good to go there, and the whole thing is kind of solid and once again still fits in place. All right, from here I'll go on to the next part, which is going to be trimming the OEM panel. All right, at this point I've got the wood panel in the correct position. I took a quick picture of where these screw holes line up. It is symmetrical despite where these holes are. And now what I'm doing is marking with a Sharpie where the panel is going to hit. The objective, I think, here is just trim away whatever I need to get the panel to sit the same way it does when the OEM piece is not in. Because one of the next steps is going to be to fiberglass resin this piece to get some strength going. And I want this to be able to mask off the trunk area, the trunk lid itself, as much as possible. So as you can see, I've got this marked, and I'll continue to do that, and then I'll carefully trim away where I've got it marked. All right, the OEM piece is trimmed away. I'll show you kind of the progression of what I did here. So first off, I got this into its correct placement, put some tape, and marked the location. Then I trimmed away the factory piece, basically carefully, everywhere that the panel touched the trunk lid. That way it, again, sits right exactly the way it is without this piece in. So let me grab that and I'll show you how it fits. And here we are with the panel in place with the OEM piece. All I'm going to be utilizing on the OEM piece is effectively the perimeter. It's kind of a good frame, a good starting place. And then I'm going to go over this with fleece, obviously. And much of this piece is going to get cut away. Basically, I think all I'm going to end up using is the border in the end. I'll cut away these back pieces later, but for now, they'll be helpful in catching resin that, you know, may drip into this area. I will be cutting away some of this back section as well. So at this point, I am ready to go to the next part. Okay, from a design perspective, this is where I'm kind of stumped. I've got a couple of ideas, but I just want to very briefly walk you through this before I actually execute. I've got the factory taillights in, which kind of stick out, and I need to have this out this far. Originally, I was thinking about knocking this down, but I need this thickness. I'm trying to figure out right now, basically, how I'm going to get this framed out. I'm going to wrap the whole thing with fleece, but obviously, if I just wrap the whole thing, I'm going to have hard edges. I need to kind of figure out how the whole thing is going to flow. Especially down in this area. This right here is like tons of dead space. I think I might cut this out, you know, like here, and cut out this center area and just have the whole thing kind of curve in just a little bit, because then I can make this radius not as aggressive. So let me play around with this. I wanted to kind of get to this point and then continue to scratch my head, but bear with me and I'll be right with you. Don't worry there, Mike. It'll look like this in no time. This is really close to final fiberglass. All right, the next step I did to get it ready for fleece was to cut out this large section of the OEM piece, because again, that was kind of pushed out here a couple of inches, and you can see there's plenty of real estate in there that would help me get kind of more of a curve here. Next, I used a silver Sharpie and marked where the factory plugs go that hold the panel on. All right, after that, I used a hole punch and punched out the holes for that. I also cut away this area. There was kind of some ridges here just to try to flatten this out and make this curve a little more tame. And we'll go to the next part. All right, next thing is a little bit of tape all the way around the perimeter. And I put the panel back in the OEM piece and just trace the perimeter just to get an idea. Then I'm going to take Pam cooking spray, spray a little bit in a cup, put it on a brush, and brush along the area that I'm going to be fiberglassing. So I'm going to resin the last couple of inches of the perimeter of this just to get kind of a base. I don't expect it to be super solid, but that's going to be the base, and then we're going to fleece over the top of that. So the Pam acts as a good release agent for the resin, so it doesn't get stuck on this and turn it into a big mess. If you do use this, just use a little teeny tiny bit, because otherwise it'll compromise the tape. In case you didn't figure it out, the part I just showed where I had all the fleece all over the top of this thing is in the future for me. So I'm speculating and hoping this comes out okay. Definitely not 1000% on the design on this. Kind of tricky, but I hope I don't kick myself later, and I hope this comes out good. I've got a decent amount of time into this so far. So, all right, Pam cooking spray is applied. Now I'm going to put the OEM piece in. I'm going to put the plugs in, and even the 4 screws that came from the factory along this bottom panel. All right, my neighbor's having a party. I have one neighbor, and apparently tonight's Sunday he's having a party. So everything is on here. It's mounted. I bought some replacement OEM plugs. These are just sacrificial. I'm going to fiberglass right over them, and then I'll pick the fiberglass out, pull these off, and scrap them. In the end design, we won't be using these. There's different mounts that I'm going to be making. And again, the objective here is just to get this on so that I can run around here. I'll run about a 2-inch wide, about this wide, strip of resin just to give this some kind of a base before I start doing the fleece part. So I'll go ahead and do that now. I'm fighting daylight and heat, so I'm going to go ahead and get this prepped right now. All right, getting dark out. It's about 6 o'clock. Resin around the perimeter, as you can see. And it's tacking up now. We'll let that cure up. It's 65 degrees out or so, so I did use a little bit extra MEKP, unlike the summer months where I was doing about 10 drops per ounce. So let this cure up. This is probably going to be it for tonight. And then tomorrow, that's where I'm going to start figuring out the fleece and getting the final shape, which again, there's some pretty good sized challenges there, but hopefully we'll get through those. All right, that'll be it for tonight. See you tomorrow. All right, it's actually a few days later. It is the day after Christmas. If you celebrated Christmas, hope you had a great one. If not, happy other holiday. And at this point, we're going to work on the vertical part. So this again has been, from a design perspective, kind of challenging for me. Because of the kind of 90-degree nature of this, it's not like I can just wrap the whole thing in fleece and resin it and be done. So I'm going to split this into 2 sections. We're going to do the vertical part, and then this I am going to fleece, but you'll see I'm going to do something different here, I believe. So let's go ahead and get started with the vertical piece. In typical precision like fashion, I built the jig. So just a mock-up out of my ready board, ran out of the white stuff, had some of this black stuff. I even had couple of small pieces. I was able to tape it together. So this just gives me a mock-up for what will be, I'm calling it the vertical panel. You'll see later how I integrate that. And also in this area, I wanted this pushed up as tight as possible because I'm going to be forming a curve here a little bit later. So, all right, the next thing is going to be to transfer this onto some material. And I've got 3 options, and in just a moment I'm going to make a final decision and transfer the material, transfer the pattern onto the material and get that cut. All right, I made a decision to use 1/8-inch masonite for weight purposes. Not my favorite, but we're gonna build this up, you'll see. So this is kind of what the piece will look like. I'm gonna be building in a piece there later again for the curve. But as you can see, we're going to be able to clean up that nasty edge, and with this I'll go to the next part. I just added a couple of little 1/2-inch pieces here, which put pressure on this, which is what I want. And it gives me just a slight curve, as you can see there. And keeps it tight up against this piece. So, all right, from here on to the next part. All right, the next step is going to be to pre-wrap the panel in fiberglass mat. This is the product I'm using. As you can see, I ordered it a few years ago. That was for a dashboard. Later, we'll be talking about the dash, but this is the product I'm using. It's an 18-ounce, very heavy duty. And what I'm going to basically do is cut it and have it hanging over the panel and then pre-resin the whole thing. So let's get started. All right, I've never worked with this particular product. We'll see. It's you get a ton for the money. It's 29 bucks for 3 yards, and the stuff is really thick. So, all right, so again, what I'm going to do is wet this whole thing down with resin. This is the line that kind of represents where the main panel is. It's okay if I kind of go over this. I'm going to basically I've cut somewhat straight of an edge, as straight as you can get when you try to cut this stuff. And it's going to intentionally hang over. I'll wet it right up along the edge. I'll show some footage of that and get the whole thing basically so that this area is all wet. I've got this prepped where I'll pull this out. It's going to sag a little bit in the center, which represents the curvature that I have in there. It doesn't have to be perfect because it will still have a bit of flex, but this will give it some rigidity and also allow me to integrate this into the actual lid. So again, the cloth will hang over, this won't have resin on it, and then when I go to attach this piece to the lid, that's when I'll apply resin to the cloth in those areas. So, all right, let's go ahead and mix up some resin and I'll show you how this goes. I don't have any fancy measuring cups, so I improvise. I pour out, I measured 8 ounces of water. I pour the water into these containers. I just keep these when my wife's cooking stuff or whatever. Mark it on the outside, transfer it to the inside, and then I'll pour my resin up to the line, and I know I've got 6 ounces. So, nothing to it. All right, it's about 58 degrees out, so not very warm. And as a result, I've added a little bit of extra. So I went to, I think, 16 to 17 drops of MEKP per ounce of resin. Get it all mixed up. This again is pretty straightforward. I'm just gonna wet this out. And again, if I go over this line, it's not the end of the world. I also did the line in Sharpie, that way I was able to see it better. I've seen people use rollers too to do this kind of work, especially if if it's a boat. My dad builds Adirondack guide boats, and I think he uses a roller for some of that. Even though it's cool out, I want to watch my open time. I will put a link in the description if anyone's interested in this mat, fiberglass mat. Just got it off Amazon. And also, if you're looking for cheap brushes, I buy them by the case at Harbor Freight. These are just a 2-inch chip brush, which are a one-time use. Obviously, I'm not going to clean these things. All right, so that's enough to get that wet. We'll set that off to the side. Now, somewhat carefully, I want to make sure that all right, now what I'll do, I'll mix up another batch of resin, and you can see this soaking through. And I will wet it down and get it all over this entire surface. I lied. I had enough mixed up, I think, to be able to do the top coat here. And once again, you can see I did this side.
That should turn a little bit, not be quite as bright white when I know that it's soaking in. I'm actually going to wet down the masonite as well, even on the exposed areas. And we're just starting to kind of harden up to the resin, so I think I got it just right as far as the mixture of MEKP. And this again is just going to give me kind of a substrate for the carpet, something a little bit more than just the masonite. And then we'll build this up with some filler as well. All right, I'm going to pull that center piece out again, kind of intentionally let it sag. We'll let that cure up for a little while, and then I'll go ahead and get another coat over it, and we'll go on to the next part. All right, it's only been a couple of minutes. We're just starting to tack up a little bit. It's going to take quite a while for this to cure up, and it doesn't need to be perfectly cure at this point, but certainly dry enough where I can work with it. If you're not aware, you can use a heat gun and very carefully kind of apply some heat, and that'll help accelerate the chemical reaction and get it cured. All right, it's been about half hour, 45 minutes since I applied the resin. I think I'm just going to do the one coat. We're going to be doing filler and all of that, so it's going to be fine. The objective here was just to kind of candy coat this and make sure, again, I've got a nice flat surface. You can see, again, the resin is obviously curing up, and this won't take much in terms of a filler to get it nice and flat. And notice again, now I've got flexible sides here, which will mold onto the factory OEM panel. So prior to doing that, there's some other stuff I'll need to do, and let's move on to those steps. All right, kind of dry fitting this piece. I ended up doing some additional cleats. These here, you'll see why I had little tiny cleats here, and I extended these. I'm going to wrap this whole part in fleece, and I wanted something to be able to staple and roll into, and I've got plenty of gap there to be able to do that. So just prepping that, but you can see how this is going to be pretty cool. I think this is really going to turn out nice the way I've got this all prepped. So all right, with that, on to the next part. All right, the next step I did is I made this edge basically a straight edge. I filled in a couple of pieces here. I thought I might do this when I initially designed this panel, if you watched that in the last video. But if you notice, I just did a piece of 1/2 inch. It's just a cleat for the fleece. And next what I'm going to do is round any sharp edges like these, like this one here, and a couple of the other ones. All right, now as you can see, I got a consistent edge there. I'm going to give this a couple of minutes of consideration. I want to round this over. I don't want to have such a sharp edge, but I do want to be careful, especially here. This is 3/4 of an inch, and when the carpet goes on here, I want to make sure the carpet is flat. So I'm not going to round it by much. I was thinking about using a router with a round over bit, but I'm not quite sure how much I want. And I might want to feather it in at a slight angle differently. So I'm going to do it by hand with a palm sander. So, all right, let me go ahead and get working on this and see what I come up with. All right, got the round over done the way I want. I ended up just doing a consistent rounded edge, nothing crazy. And a couple of other things to consider. What I like to do at this point, especially if you watch the side panels, I spent way too much time having to fill and do all kinds of work. Just taking a scrap piece of fleece and just kind of holding it in different areas to make sure I don't have any high spots or low spots or anything that's going to act weird. This again is where I'm trying to get an idea. You can see that curve there, and I think that's going to look good. Over here, I almost forgot, I still have my fleece inserts, which again, the carpet comes up to this edge. So I've got a lot of meat here, and I think I'll be fine with the carpet being nice and flat here. So, all right, that should be it for this part, getting this edge ready. Now I'll go to the next part, which will be just more checking and filling of different areas where I have to.
Nothing says old school car audio build more than aluminum foil when using fiberglass resin. So for this, I'm just masking off this area just to make sure I don't get any resin on the Dynamat. Next step is to rough cut the fleece to size, and we're going to remove the fleece in the panel and I'll staple it to the back side. I'll show you how I do that.
All right, so to start attaching the fleece to the panel, what I'm going to do is staple it along this backside, just to tack it along this to hold it. I'll give it a little bit of pressure just to stretch it. Tack it a couple spots. And I'm going to pull on it. Nothing crazy. I don't want to go nuts because I'm going to be pulling in all different directions. Staple this end, and then basically I'll just go right along, staple this whole area, and then put the panel back into the trunk lid for preparation for resin. Okay, stapled along that edge. I'll trim this extra. I do have some other things to do before we get into resin, but we're getting close.
All right, one more step before I put the panel into the lid for the last time before resin. I'm adding a couple of pieces of double-sided tape. I don't want this thing the panel to move around as I secure the fleece. I'll be able to obviously lift this up later.
All right, so at this point, I'm ready to start doing the final attachment of the fleece to what I'm calling the OEM panel. If you remember, I resined this up just to give it a little bit more rigidity. It's just kind of sitting on there. I've got an idea for that as well. The way I'm going to attach the fleece to this OEM panel is probably going to be controversial. I've never seen anyone do this, but I don't see a problem with it. If you spray glue it, the problem is as soon as you paint it with resin, the resin eats at the spray glue and wrecks the spray glue and the whole thing comes apart, which I've experienced in the past. So I'm going to try to hot glue it. I'm just going to run a small amount of hot glue along, again, what I'm calling the OEM panel. Here we go. This is not obviously what's really going to hold this thing. It's going to be the resin once I resin the whole thing. But let's go ahead and give this a shot. So far, so good. I don't hate it. I don't think it's going to give me a perfectly consistent edge, but that's okay. The objective is just to hold it while I resin it. Again, if you remember from like the side panel videos, there's going to be a lot of filler and shaping and sanding and all of that. But this, I think this is going to work. I see where I'm going to want to go a little bit tighter up against the OEM panel, and then I'll trim this and get it ready for resin. So, all right, let me go around and get the whole perimeter, and I'll catch up with you in a few minutes.
All right, it worked. And I'm sure some of you are shaking your head right now, like, what the hell is this guy doing? I did even added a little bit of hot glue just to keep this panel in place because it's wanting to just slightly lift up here and there, but it is tight. It's solid. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I've just had bad experiences where I go to paint something with resin, come back the next day, and it's lifting up, you know, and you got an inch gap and all this kind of crap. So I think it's good. You can see I've got some irregularities here a little bit, but again, resin, body filler, there's all kinds of things going in here. So, all right, the next thing is going to be to brad nail in the fleece inlays. All right, fleece inlays are attached. And if you notice, exactly as I designed, when I resin this, I have a little tiny bit of a lip, 1/8 of an inch. That way I can use body filler. This is not going to get knocked down or really, I might sand it a touch, but it's really, I'm trying to maintain this because that's my finished edge that my carpet will go against. And again, I'll cut the carpet in like that. So, I also just kind of dry runned the vertical panel in place, and I think it's going to end up being pretty pretty relatively easy here to work on this and get this in place. I'm going to resin this first, and then we'll integrate the panel. And then I still need to do like a transition here. I'm going to do some kind of a curve. I've got a plan, an idea there. But next, I'm going to go ahead and bring the whole thing outside into the driveway. It's about 65 degrees out, so it's still the same day that I resin this back piece. Been working on the car all day, so let's go ahead and bring it outside and we'll get this painted with resin. All right, let's get some resin on this thing. Notice I taped off around the perimeter of the fleece inlays. I want to try to keep those as kind of clean as possible. If I end up getting resin in that inside edge, I'll end up having to sand it off, and that could make a mess. So now at this point, I am going to soak the resin in really good. If you saw my video for the side panels, I did something similar. And if you're doing a similar kind of a technique, and maybe you're doing like pillars or something, you don't normally need to do like fleece. You can use, I haven't seen anybody doing it lately, but kind of the old school way was we used to use grill cloth, and that was really nice and flexible, and you can get your shape and, you know, make a wooden skeleton, and then cover it with grill cloth, whatever it is that you're building, and then be able to go in and resin that, and you get a really nice proper shape. We used to do it for, I used to do like tweeter pillars back in the 90s like that. So all right, I'll probably certainly need more resin, but I'd rather work in a controllable amount. I realize now I'm starting at the end, you really can't see, but one other thing too, I'm curious, maybe in the comments if somebody wants to let me know, this, again, like to do what I wanted to do, wasn't exactly sure how I was going to do it, and in typical precision-like fashion, I kind of overdid it, over-engineered the hell out of it, but based on what I'm seeing so far, I think I'm going to be really happy with the final result. And I'm curious, how would you have done this? If you were to do this on your own, something similar, building up the trunk lid to be able to put in this case, an iPad and a couple of display panels. I know that there's a lot of templates out there you can buy, you know, these crazy jigs, which are really, really nice. And that's great if you're a shop and you're on the clock and time is money and money is time. This is obviously a labor of love for me, so I'm not in a massive hurry, so I don't need to worry too much about time, although I do have to get this thing done someday. But how would you have done it if you were to do something like this? So curious of different various techniques. So all right, I'll go ahead and continue getting this painted on, and I will show you the final result in just a bit. Main panel is resined. I did 3 coats. When you do this stuff, if you do this, the fleece really absorbs it, and that's what you want. You want it to really soak in. That's gonna, you don't want it to just lay on the top surface because it's not going to do much for strength. So basically I started at one end, painted it with resin. By the time I got over the other end, it wasn't very shiny. See where it's a bit shiny there? That's an indication that it's kind of saturated. So I like to get it good and saturated, and I did excuse me, up into this edge, which again, we'll use some body filler later for that. So all right, at this point, what I'm going to do while this is tacking up, I'm going to grab the other piece, slip it in there, and begin to go around and resin that. I noticed that the mat wants to kind of fall apart. I was thinking about maybe like cutting it to get right to the edge, but if I do that, it's going to want to fall apart. So I'm going to leave it really long. I'll pre-resin this, kind of get it wet, and then I'll put the piece in and push it in place and do the same thing. It'll look kind of nasty and hang over the edge, but once it's cured, I'll trim away the extra. So, and this edge, obviously, we're going to need to clean this up, but that's what the body filler's for. So, all right, we'll continue on. One other quick thing I didn't mention up till now. I'm considering this. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do yet. I want to wait until I'm to the shaping part, which will be in the next video. But the trunk bars mount right here, the arms. and I don't like the look of them where they're exposed. So I'm going to extend this and build like a cap that covers it so that the arms are kind of hidden, as you would see in like a, for example, a newer car such as here's one of my Mercedes. You can see obviously everything is kind of capped off. So I want to do something similar to that where it looks a bit cleaner. The other thing too is the wiring comes in just on this side for like the trunk lights and stuff like that. I'm going to do something where I'll make it symmetrical because I'm a nut about that. Both sides symmetrical, and we'll do some other stuff later on that. So, all right, let's continue on and grab that vertical panel. All right, I think I have a plan here. Winging it. You might be wondering, why not just do fleece on this entire thing? I like the notion of using this mat for this vertical part. I think it lays flatter on like the masonite where I put it. I definitely think that's the case, more so than fleece. Fleece, I like for its kind of stretch properties. So what I'm doing here, again, much like I did when I did the vertical part, I'm just kind of back wetting the resin onto the OEM panel. And this piece was not flat to begin with. I mean, these trunks are not meant to be, you know, show-worthy carpet. So we're going to be doing some filling and sanding, but hopefully it's not going to be too bad. Notice too, I cut this for the latch area. That also gives me a place to kind of break up the work and break it into kind of two different sections. So, all right, let's see how this looks. Again, I know that it's going to be way more than I need, but that's okay, because of the way this stuff wants to unravel. And you can kind of see it doing that. That aspect of it is a bit messy, not gonna lie. But I like it. All right, let's continue to paint this. I also did put a bit more masking tape on the car, on the actual lid, just to make sure. The whole car is being repainted, so it's not terrible if I get some paint on, or some resin on some areas, but not something I'm trying to do intentionally. I was just thinking about it too. I asked, you know, how would you do this kind of a panel? How would you build this? And no disrespect to anyone, but I don't see people doing stuff like this anymore. I just see people taking maybe the factory piece and mounting something on that, and that's about it. Doing this kind of a big rebuild of a whole panel like this, I don't think is really something people are still up to these days. Maybe I'm wrong, and if so, school me. But, all right, I think this is gonna work, and you can see how I'm just kind of working the resin into this area just to get it to sit flat, much like I did when I did the vertical part. And this is gonna end up being a lot better than if I trimmed it. If I trimmed it first, it would have been a mess. It would have disintegrated. I would have had to kind of fit it in. Even this, I'm just gonna go right over this because I don't want to fight it. All right, I'm gonna continue working on this. And as this kind of soaks into the mat becomes more flexible and more workable. See where I'm getting like this corner, for example? I'll keep doing that, and we'll get this section done, and then I'll mix up another batch of resin, and I'll do the other side. All right, all things considered, not too bad. It's still not fully cured. I'm going to hit it with a heat gun and work it with a brush as I go. I got a little lump over here. Again, I'll be doing some sanding and filling, but not nearly as bad as those side panels. So all in all, again, I think I'm happy with the way it's coming out. So I'll hit it with a heat gun. It's getting to be, it's like, I don't know, 5:30, something like that. So that'll probably be it for tonight. I am off again tomorrow, Friday, so I will continue to work on it. So all right, let me hit it with a heat gun and see how this goes. All right, resin is cured. Looks quite a bit uglier than it really is. I don't think it's gonna be that bad to do what I need to do in this area. It's gonna be difficult as heck to carpet that, but that's later. Notice I also took the tape off the inlays. I did that when the resin was a little bit tacky still. It's pretty dry now, but that was a lot easier to do and it came off real nice. But I've got quite a bit of, you know, sanding and filling to do. It's not that hard of work to do. But that is going to wrap up this video. This is everything I wanted to get done in this video. In terms of time, I am a little over 50 hours so far in this whole trunk lid, including dynamatting and all that. My goal is to get it done and have it under 100 hours. Seems like everything I do is 100 hours. So I do still have a decent amount to do. We've got to do obviously some shaping, filling, quite a bit of that. I'm going to deal with this. I'm going to do a curve right here. We'll have more shaping along this front side, basically the whole thing. And then we've got lighting, mounting it to the lid, making sure it's fully solid and all of that. So that's going to be it again for this video. If you made it this far, you're a trooper. Thanks once again for watching. I really certainly appreciate it and hope you're enjoying this build so far. A lot more to go. If you have not already, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks very much. Have a good day.